In my opinion, one of the most fascinating facts about the human mind, one that opened me to a completely different way of thinking about the world, is that the brain is profoundly divided between two asymmetric hemispheres. Each hemisphere controls the opposite side of the body, meaning your right hand is controlled by your left hemisphere, and information entering your left eye is processed by the right hemisphere. You may have already seen me discuss this incredible fact in my other videos, particularly on the theory of the bicameral mind. But in this series, I want to discuss another one of my favorite books on the subject, one which takes a closer look at the nature of these differences, The Master and His Emissary by Iain McGilchrist. This video will be the first part in a series on this book, through which I hope to show just how substantial of a fact it is that the hemispheres are so different from one another, as well as the dangers of trusting one hemisphere and disregarding the other. It was first noticed in the 19th century that the two cerebral hemispheres of the brain aren't simply mirror images of each other, but actually have slightly different functions. The first major difference to be noticed was that the left hemisphere was predominantly involved in language, containing the areas responsible for speech. The next major difference to be discovered was that the right hemisphere was better at processing visual material, and so it was assumed for a while that the right hemisphere deals with pictures, while the left hemisphere deals with words. However, a closer examination at the evidence revealed that both hemispheres actually process both types of information, and this discovery caused many scientists to disregard hemisphere asymmetry entirely, claiming that the hemispheres are more alike than they are unlike. Others oversimplify the nature of these differences, and many pop psychology beliefs about the hemispheres, such as this one, can be found all over the internet. And while this isn't necessarily wrong, the true picture is actually more complex. As V.S. Ramachandran, one of the world's leading neuroscientists, once remarked, the existence of such a pop culture shouldn't cloud the main issue, the notion that the two hemispheres may indeed be specialized for different functions. A close investigation of the available evidence does suggest that there are important differences between the hemispheres, as they differ in physical structure, neurochemistry, and in how they perceive reality. In fact, they have fundamentally different takes on the world, almost as if we have two distinct personalities inside of us. However, McGilchrist goes even further, and puts forth the notion that the differences between the hemispheres are in fact reflected in human culture, and one can witness how hemispheric differences give rise to great cultural shifts. He even argues that their nature is competitive, existing in a kind of power struggle, which we each feel at the individual level, but which also shapes us profoundly at the cultural level. Perhaps the most well-confirmed difference is that the left hemisphere deals with pieces of information, while the right hemisphere is more attentive to the whole, the gestalt. This distinction, which may seem minor, actually has profound consequences for how we perceive the world. While one of the functions of the brain is to connect us with the outer world, each hemisphere adds something to our perceptions, a specific cognitive attitude, which changes how we interpret the information we perceive. The two hemispheres are connected to each other, but the structures which connect them also serve the function of keeping them separated and compartmentalized, which implies that they need to be kept apart so as not to interfere with each other. They both serve important, specialized functions, and work optimally when there is a balance between them. McGilchrist puts forth the analogy of a nurse and a surgeon to illustrate the relationship between the hemispheres. Both the nurse and the surgeon perform crucial tasks, and they compensate each other's deficiencies. We may value the surgeon more, but he can't do his work without a nurse. However, it seems in the modern world that there is a clear preference for left hemisphere modes of thinking, and the contribution of the right hemisphere is being disregarded in favor of the serial, linear approach of the left hemisphere. If they are engaged in a power struggle, the left is winning, and this may be a detrimental trajectory. Before we discuss how the hemispheres differ precisely, we will need to discuss some things which are important to keep in mind. It is sometimes said that the two hemispheres are more alike than they are unlike. This is technically true when looking at the major structures, but they are still functionally asymmetric, and it is their differences that matter. It is like saying that Albert Einstein and Benito Mussolini are more alike than unlike, since they are both human males. I mean, technically that's correct, but the differences go a long way to produce distinctive entities. Furthermore, when we say that the left hemisphere does this or that the right hemisphere does that, keep in mind that both hemispheres are likely to be involved to some degree. But what we mean is that one hemisphere predominates, or plays the main role, even if both are ultimately involved. It is also important to note that some of these facts are generalizations, and aren't applicable to every single person. Some people may use their right hemisphere for certain tasks, where the majority uses the left hemisphere, but a few counterexamples doesn't disprove the general rule. The generalization still persists, because it is what we expect most of the time, barring a few exceptional individuals. We also need to discuss individuals who are not right-handed, who comprise approximately 11% of the population. About 75% of these individuals have pretty much the same brain arrangement, except for handedness, and so most of these generalizations apply to them as well. For others, the left and right hemispheres have been switched around, and so everything applies equally the same, except when I say left hemisphere, I mean the right hemisphere of these individuals, and vice versa. There are, however, people who break many of the rules of brain lateralization, and have functions distributed very differently than what is otherwise considered normal, giving them unique abilities and disadvantages. While these individuals are extraordinary, many of the generalizations about hemisphere differences don't apply to them, but since they comprise less than 5% of the population, the statements which we will make are still generally accurate. Asymmetry is at the root of the brain. We perceive the world in two fundamentally distinct and opposing ways. The title of the Master and His Emissary comes from a Nietzschean tale of a wise and virtuous king, whose kingdom grew too large for him to directly govern. He therefore needed to delegate certain tasks to subordinates, emissaries, who could travel to the distant regions of the kingdom. However, one of the emissaries begins to see himself as the master. Rather than acting on behalf of the king, he uses his position to advance his own agenda, while the king remains oblivious, leading to the collapse of the kingdom. According to McGilchrist, the master is the right hemisphere, who is slowly being usurped by his emissary, the left hemisphere. And unless we correct course, this power dynamic may lead to the degradation of civilization as we know it. In future videos, we will discuss exactly how the hemispheres differ from each other, and what the nature of this power imbalance really is. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss a single video in this upcoming series, and I can't wait to see what you guys have to think about this fascinating topic.